All right, guys. Wow. That is tough. That's a tough episode to watch. If you have not watched it, I'm going to let you know now how it is rough. It's a rough episode to watch for anybody. A lot of insight came from this episode to me from the family. Um, Unbelievable questions being answered because the director asks the questions. And so it's pretty interesting what comes up with that. Um, don't mind the background. We have some new studio look coming. I got a shelf that's going to be building on Pop Culture Poppy for all of the random stuff that I have, the action figures, the cool stuff. I'm going to make a shelf, a special shelf in there for stuff. So I'm going to have that behind me against this wall. So that's why it's blank. And you guys will see that soon. Good to see you guys, man. So I want to correct myself on one thing. I did tell you guys that this was on Disney Plus. I watched it because we have the Disney Plus, Hulu, and something else bundle. It is actually a Hulu original, and so it's actually a Hulu thing. So, but we watched it through Disney Plus, so that's because it's on all those platforms. So, just finished this up, and unbelievable amount of notes on this last episode. I was kind of cringing over this last episode. I didn't want to necessarily have to watch it. I knew what it was going to entail, but I learned so much. And yeah, you guys are going to love the shelves. I'm going to build them and put that up on Pop Culture Poppy so you guys can see that. Um, they're really nice and they have the lights on them. They're for all the figures and random stuff that I have. That's my nerd stuff. So you'll always see that. And then I'll have my pictures. I'm gonna pull the camera back in the room so you guys have pictures. There'll be just a lot more going on. So I'm excited about that. Appreciate you. It's good to see you guys, man. So again, like I said, this is a long breakdown. So I'll get to it. I have a lot of pages. I wrote this time and I wrote in very big font. So I have 36 pages of notes, but it's not actually 36 pages as far as this goes. But I just wrote down so many different things. If you haven't seen this, I recommend watching it, especially with the breakdowns. I wish we could watch them, but we just can't. So that's just how it goes. You guys know we've been copyrighted on our channel so many times. We just don't want to have to go through that. So we'll leave that alone. So opening up on episode 3, it is Jody on the phone with her attorney. She is freaking out and she is being pulled out of her house for the police to search it. Obviously, it starts off to go backwards. So when it starts at where we know we're going, and then it goes back to a year before, and the neighbors are now kind of discussing the family and what they've noticed. So Kevin and Chad and Sherry are all out of the house, and only the 4 youngest kids are left there alone with Ruby. I'll add this in and even write this down, but in the thing, it shows her in the video ringing a bell, like a loud bell, and then turning it around and having the kids walk downstairs after ringing the bell, which I thought was just, I don't know. That just to me was weird. Ruby is now at this point doing influencing still, but she is specifically talking about parenting. And in this context, she starts to tell people online. This is where I'm like telling you, these parallels are things we are going to have to deep dive on in a completely other episode. But Ruby starts to say, and this is online, this is a video she was posting. This is things where people are watching and interacting with. And Ruby says, your woke child is a walking zombie. I kid you not. The word zombie is being used in this context by Ruby Frankie online. This is when she is in her parenting era where she's really harsh at this point again with the parenting stuff. So this is during this. Ruby says you have the opportunity to wake the zombies up. This is her telling you that she is against the thing inside the children. She's giving you a look inside of her. So her advice is you can wake these zombies up. Okay. She uses the word zombies. As we know, this was very hard and a big trigger because this is obviously, we're past the point of comparison here. You guys know I'm obviously comparing it to my family. The problem being is, where is this coming from in this indoctrination of zombie to demon possession? Those two things are really weird to me, because a zombie, metaphorically, in a pop culture way, as we know from every iteration, is usually something that is dead, that is animated and no longer, at least in like the Walking Dead, things that are very popular, there's nothing in there at all. There's nothing alive about a zombie. That's the whole point. They're not really the same person. They're kind of just like a walking body. So the idea of using the demons and the zombies for both people, where do they get this from? And that's always going to be my question, is this basis of belief system, is how in the world did they both end up calling their children zombies? And what's interesting is that she's teaching others you can wake up the zombie, and she says your woke children have the opportunity to have, it says, she said, your woke child is a walking zombie and you have the opportunity to wake them up. Okay. And I wrote, this cannot be a coincidence. So then the kids are forced to watch Jody. It's an interesting thing, because in there you're watching the children watch. Now, again, children's brains are meant to be developed by their parents. They're meant to be told who they are. The problem is Jody is giving the children their identity, and she's telling them, you are bad. You are doing this. You need to change this, just like she was doing to Chad. She would isolate people in a therapeutic way, right? Get them in a room alone and tell them things. But as even younger children, they're being forced to watch Jody, and Jody's telling them things about themselves, about their character, and about who they are, which is very dangerous, because obviously she should never give advice to another human being, but this is the position she was in. And Ruby's filming them watching Jody, and then having like the same B-roll. And I use this word because this is like a production thing that Ruby was doing. The production idea is like, get closer to the camera, or so she tells her youngest child to get closer to watching Jody, so that way she can catch her face and see her face looking at the iPad, which is watching Jody speak. You see what I'm saying? Like, the kids now are going back to that place of performance for the camera, as if all the kids are gathered around watching Jody, and it's just this cute moment of the family. So you're still getting this instructions from Ruby, like a director, on how to make a scene. And she's still doing this to the younger kids. And mind you, the crazy thing is, the gap is this whole year, you already had Sherry is completely cut off. Chad is completely cut off. And now Kevin is completely cut off. We're talking about no contact kind of stuff. No contact with the younger four, and no contact with Ruby or Jody. Or I guess Jody was still having some contact, and we'll get to that. And then I wrote, those kids are still under that pressure to perform. They are now being described as joyless. So the kids are now joyless. I wonder why. I wonder why the kids are not having fun or having joy in their life. But they're not doing what they're supposed to do, right? Yeah. If you do end up watching it, this will make a lot more sense in context. It's on Hulu, guys. I said it was on Disney Plus, but it is, if you have the bundle, we have the bundle. It's on Hulu, and you can watch it. So they're described as joyless. And then Ruby was confronted about Kevin and Chad leaving, and Ruby said, this is by the neighbors, by the way. So the neighbors have a part in this, because it's a smaller community, and they're questioning things because they're watching how the house operates, right? And they're a closer community. So Ruby was confronted about Kevin and Chad leaving, and Ruby said every marriage should have a separation. It could be a year, and it could be up to 5 years, because they're going, hey, what's going on? Where's Kevin? And he's not around. And she said, every marriage needs a separation. Could be a year, could be 5. I mean, real casual. So this is the outer look. And we have to understand, if Lori did not bounce and bounce and bounce from house to house, these kind of questions would have come up, but nobody knew who she was because she moved so much. So we're talking about a community where you plant and have a house, everybody, your neighbors, you go to church with them, them, you see them cutting their grass. We're talking about a real community. So that's why this is different. So they're asking, and that's what she said to the neighbors. Kevin goes into no contact, and he was scared for the loss of his marriage and his kids. And then I wrote the word manipulated. And the reason why he's also being manipulated. Now, regardless of Kevin's involvement during the 8 passengers, you have to understand there's a lot of manipulation in this situation. Ruby is being manipulated by Jody, but Jody probably is being manipulated by Ruby, and Ruby is now manipulating her entire family, including her husband, pushing him out. There's so much manipulation. So this is what I wrote for Kevin, and I said manipulated because he's being told you're bad, you got to go, this is your fault, and he thinks the righteous desire of his heart is to have his family and his wife. Okay, that's a big, like, what I don't, there's nothing wrong with his desire to want his wife. That's all I will say. That is still a normal desire. The problem is it caused him to fall in line, because if he falls out of line, he would be therefore punished. So this is all about punishment and about losing what you don't want. And this becomes about manipulation. So Ruby was manipulating Kevin in the sense of, you'll lose your family, you'll lose your everything if you do anything that I don't like. You cannot contact us until I contact you. It's very manipulative towards Kevin in this way. So he leaves and does no contact. He listens. I don't know how he did it, but you have to understand he was afraid. He was afraid. Now, regardless, I'm not giving him a back and forth. I'm just telling you there was manipulation on this side. That's all I'm telling you. He would support Ruby over his kids, is what he said, and he needed to convince Jody to get Ruby back, and he isolated himself. So this is all part of this. He was going to Jody to try to get his family back, thinking that she was going to be the prophetess or the gateway, trying to prove and show. He wanted to prove himself that he was worthy to have his wife. But the problem is he was putting Ruby above everything, and we will get into that because that is part of what causes him to allow this to happen at first. And it gets really deep, and the end of the episode actually shocked me with how deep it goes with Chad and how deep it goes with Kevin and what they actually believed. TJ says, I'm going to watch this, or I'm going to say this after watching the doc. I just wonder, had Brandon been taken away, I fear where his kids would be with Lori and Chad turn up the pain during that road trip. Exactly, TJ, you're not wrong. And this is the whole point. Hey, Rosie. This is the whole point, reason we're bringing this up. This is not a one-off thing, apparently. This is not something that's happened one time and we can say, okay, that was a one-time thing. Not a lot of people get into this. This is an indoctrination with almost the same verbiage, the same type of things happening, and it involves their own children. And it's something that we have to bring some awareness to and talk about, because this is not okay. And this is leading to some of the worst things that have ever happened. Okay. So that's why we're talking about this right now. So he isolated himself, but he had to convince Jody to get back Ruby. Chad moved himself outside of the university. So like BYU is what I'm assuming. He just said the university. He was still talking to Jody, and she is controlling Chad because he loves and trusts her. So he's still meeting with Jody. You need to understand the indoctrination that is happening here. And we need to start zooming out and understanding why people think and behave the way that they do until they get to a different place. Some people don't know anything different until they are on the other side, until they learn and understand more and learn better, right? Don't know the difference. They don't know the difference here. What's interesting is that Jody still got Chad's ear, even though he's out. He's still being told, you got to stop doing this, you got to stop doing that. Basically, still telling him how to act and how to be. That's what's so concerning here, is that Chad's still being manipulated by Jody. She's still feeding off of that. And of course, we're talking about time on time on time. He's been doing this for how many years at this point? Chad has built a relationship with Jody, and she's got his ear, and he thinks that she's righteous. This is a lot of time that you need to understand. He spent all this time believing she was a good person, and he believed all this time that she was trying to help him and his family. This is where we need to zoom out and start thinking about what it's really like to be on that other side for these people, right? Okay. So he wanted to prove himself. And then both men felt like they were needed to get better because the women were making it their fault. And I wrote that very specifically, and here's why. Both Chad and Kevin were both being told, this is your fault. You need to get better. You need to do better. You need to do this. You need to do that. You need to prove yourself. You need to become a worthy person to be able to be here. It's a very long list, but it's giving a man, you're not doing enough. You need to prove yourself. But both men took that to heart, left went no contact, did what they were asked to do because they believed that the people that were asking them to do so were wholly good people and that they were wrong. So they start gaslighting themselves and now saying, well, I am wrong. I did the wrong thing. So there it is. I mean, it's causing all of these mental effects that's getting deeply into these men both, and it keeps them away. And as we know, Sherry came down. Sherry is like the confronter. She's the one that like does things to confront things. And she's the one that obviously called the police and did all that. We'll get into it, but she's the one that like comes out and faces it. So she faced Ruby, and Ruby said, you're no longer a part of this family. You need to go. And Sherry's in a whole nother place than Chad and Kevin, and you can tell. So Sherry couldn't even talk to her dad. And that's what's even weirder is that she texted him and he hearted the message and then he unhearted it. And it's because Kevin was probably so scared to do anything that could possibly jeopardize the family. And you have to understand how deep this goes. This dude was literally saying, I can't even talk to my kids because Ruby won't let me. That's where it has to be broken, is understanding that is not a righteous thing to do, is tell a grown man you cannot see your kids or talk to your kids, especially your adult kids, but even your younger kids. Like, there's nothing about that that's okay. There's nothing about that that would make any sense, that you're not allowed to talk to your children. That's unbelievable. But he was being manipulated to do that. So what's interesting about this Hulu back and forth documentary, and what I like about it the most, is you do hear the director asking questions off camera and then the person answering it. And that's a big deal because then you get a lot of context because you know what the question was. They're not just speaking. So the director asks him, why didn't you stand up to Kevin? And he said, he can't even dwell on it because it eats him alive. So he's in a new place by the time they made this documentary. Obviously, there's probably a part of him that really wishes everything was different, as everybody does in these situations. But it is interesting that he's here giving a perspective now. So then it goes to the next piece. It says, new videos were coming out, and Ruby said, I love the principals more than my child. And she wanted only order. And I said, has no love for anyone. When I wrote this, it's because she's sitting there with Jody and she goes, I love principals more than I love my children, very clearly. And Jody even goes, whoa. And she's like, yeah, I mean it. And so it looks to me that Ruby's idea of love and all this stuff that she did was all about order, and you do what I say. And if you jump out of line, there are major, major consequences for jumping out of line. And that is how she either was raised. I don't know that personally. I'm just saying she learned this behavior somewhere, that all it's about is you do exactly what I say. And if you don't listen, then you are a bad demon type of thing. And this is where this goes into deeper. We'll get into this. Kevin, for me, is very tragic and also a victim. He is their father, but when you are terrified to lose someone, then a licensed therapist endorsed by their church is truly evil. Exactly. Yeah, this whole thing is nuts. You're absolutely right. It gets so deep though, guys. It's going deeper every time I watch these episodes. It went deeper, and the closer and closer that Lori and her get, it doesn't make any sense. So this is where it gets really crazy. Okay. So she starts telling people how to parent online. This is her whole thing now. Now she's talking about weird stuff like, if your child's on fire, it doesn't matter what you do. You throw them on the ground and you hit them until the fire's out and you get rid of that fire. So now I'm starting to hear the subtleties of, if there's a demon in your child, you do anything you can. You put them on the ground. Doesn't matter if they resist or not. You take care of it. That's what it sounds like. She gave another analogy I think I wrote down. I'll read it when I get down there. And then she starts going to St. George. Now the kids are alone at home while Ruby is gone for days. So now Ruby is abandoning the kids at home so she can go and do her spiritual stuff. Now this is the Lori effect. Lori started to go and travel, right? Lori started to go and leave, but instead of leaving, she would get people to watch whoever, and then she'd leave and go. And then eventually, obviously, we know what happened to my family, and I don't want to have to, I'm not going to just say it because it's hard to talk about, but we know that her whole goal was to be able to go and just freely go do whatever work that they thought was important. And now you have to understand, I think a part of them does think that they're doing something good, but they've convinced themselves of that. And I think that goes with any villain. If you really go into what is evil. We will talk about this another time. These are deeper dive videos. But when you talk about these women and we go into what is evil, I think the women and the men that do the things they do are justified in their mind. It doesn't matter what the justification is. It's not just random. They're not always just doing it to be evil. They're always, if you really look at them, have some reason. It doesn't matter if it's money or religion or whatever the case is. They do have a reason why they're doing it. And I'm not saying I'm justifying the reason. I'm just telling you that there is some reason why they're doing what they're doing. And it's horrible reasons, but they've justified it in their own brains. So that's what's crazy to me. So this is where Sherry is said, I'm getting nervous about my family. She calls 911 and she wants a welfare check. She even told the police that she hasn't talked to them, that she's basically estranged and she just has a bad feeling. She said the neighbors are telling me that they're walking by the house and the kids are standing in the window looking outside, and that once they went back, that like they'd leave the house, see the kids in the windows, and then they'd come back later in the day and the kids were still in the windows. Like there's nobody home, and they wouldn't see Ruby's car for days. They said at first it was hours and now it's days. Okay. Exactly. Great point. Not a lot of people. I mean, I can think of one person off the top of my head. The Joker from Dark Knight is one of the only examples where he just loves chaos planned out. Most people have an idea of why they think that what they're doing is justified. And that's what's scary, is that you will go deeper into this. When you start reading the notes that Ruby took, you will understand. And I'll go into that in a minute. So at some point after, when they asked for the welfare check, the neighbors were asked to talk to the police. The police needed a warrant and they couldn't get one. So the judge wouldn't do anything. They couldn't get into the house. They didn't have a warrant to get in there. And the neighbors are obviously concerned, but I guess a lot of neighbors wouldn't come outside because they didn't want to have to deal with it. So they're probably scared and they just kind of let it be. So that is what it is. I did have to write down though, Kevin wouldn't do anything because apparently neighbors were texting him, hey, there's police outside. They're doing this stuff. He was blocking people. He didn't want anything to upset Ruby. He didn't want to do anything that would upset her. And I don't know, man, that to me, we could talk about, we'll just have to talk about Kevin separately from all of this stuff to break it down, because it's just, that's a whole nother thing. Okay. Ruby started to neglect like Lori and veer off. She is talking about doing anything to control the kids, and the public was outraged. So where they start to come into another main meeting point for Lori and Ruby is they start talking about getting, they want control over the children. She's telling people online this stuff, by the way. So this is being posted apparently, and the public is responding. There's comments. There's, hey, this is abuse. This is horrible. You can't do this. Like, people are going crazy, and she doesn't care. She thinks that's opposition. They both do this to their own children because now they've justified in their own brains that their children are demon possessed and that they have to be the ones to do something about it. Now, you have to see this for what it is. This is still, this is more common probably than we think it is. People believe this about their children, and there's no biblical reason to believe this. There's no biblical backing to this. And we have to make that clear here. And I wrote, yeah, the public was outraged. I mean, the comments were coming in. Hey, this like clear as day, giving her opposition. Now you have to understand, Lori didn't have that public platform by that point, but she also knew who to tell and who not to tell. Ruby's out here trying to preach this like full on, like, hey, this is how it goes. She was fully committed to this, and she was publicly going into this place. Then the kids weren't allowed to play outside after the police came to the house. Ruby continues to talk about the infections. Yes, that was another thing. So she talked about, I wrote, the infections or the fire as a thing that needs to be dealt with no matter the cost. So this is where you see her specifically basically telling you that the kids they have an infection or they're on fire. She wrote up the infection thing. The infection thing is like, if your kid has an infection, it doesn't matter what kind of surgery, it doesn't matter how hurt they are. You go in there and you do surgery and you get it out. You get the infection out. Very clear. I mean, she's basically stating exactly how she thinks and feels about those children right there in that video. And she's trying to give this advice that it doesn't matter the cost of getting the infection out. Okay. She's already used the word zombie. She's already used the word fire if they're on fire. And now she's already used the word infection. So multiple ways of saying the same thing for her. Okay. And then 10 months later, you see the ring footage. And this is where I'm going to try to be as this is where it gets really rough. If you guys are, I'm just going to give you the viewer discretion now because this is where it gets hard. I don't go into super detail, but I do have to just detail for what it was because this is the context of how bad it truly was for these kids. So I'm just letting you know going forward from this point, we are going to be discussing what happens with the kids and how everything was found in the house. So I just need you to know that before we keep going. Okay. Because these are the notes that I wrote. So you go from in the document and you fast forward to the 10 months later. We see the ring footage of a little boy who knocks on a door 2 houses down and asks for a favor. He asks for the favor. He says, I need 2 favors. One is to go to the police station. And the man asks, why do you need to go to the police station? And he said, well, I just need one favor. And he says, well, why do you need to go to the police station? And the young boy says, it's personal business. I mean, my heart for this little boy and this family already is so broken, but like, and I've seen this footage before. This is the footage I brought up to you guys, but to now know the context and to know what that would be like to be him and have to break out of your literal bonds and go and walk to someone's house and ask these questions and ask this is the word bravery on his part is not even a word for it. It's just like he literally saved his own life and his sister's life. He saved their life. And you need to understand how bad it was when I tell you what happens next, okay? The 911 call, it is brutal. He describes the way that he is emaciated, he's hungry, he's thirsty. He had duct tape around each ankle, and the man starts to cry as he describes how he has been detained. So the context here is you're at home and a little boy knocks on your door. You open it and he stands back and he's trying to he's calm as possible and asks you to take you to the police station. Oh, okay. Ask you to take you to the police station because he broke out of hell of a cell and he's tied up, he's starving, he's skinny as a rail, he hasn't had water, and he literally doesn't know what else to do. And he's even saying it's personal business. Don't worry about it. Just please take me to the police station. And it's really hard to watch, man. It's really, really, really hard to watch. And then the man gives the 911 call, and how do you make that call without losing it? How do you keep your composure? The police respond to find that he had duct tape on his ankles and his wrists. They had to get some photos of his tape. He was skin and bones, and you can see, and then they were very specific to say that they could see his tendons. He was so skinny. One of the paramedics described how they could see his Achilles tendon so clearly because of how malnourished he was. The only way to get to that point, ladies and gentlemen, from that is to be absolutely have almost nothing to eat and be constantly burning more calories. And we're going to talk about why he was this way. It is unbelievable how pushed to the brink these kids were, beyond punished to do these things. So he is so skinny. He told them that he had been handcuffed and that he had a little sister in the home. So this is while the police arrive, the paramedics arrive, they start to tend to him. The police hop in and he says, I'd been handcuffed. He starts to give them a little bit of context. And then they go and he says, my little sister's in the home. The officer says, when did you see your little sister last? And he said, the last time I saw her, it was over a month ago. He said he had heard her, but he hasn't seen her. So he has been at least in this state. We don't know exactly how long, but he has been in this state for that long and hasn't seen his sister. Knows she's somewhere, but has heard something. Who knows what he had heard? But he knows that she's there by that, and he hasn't seen her in a month. And we'll get into more of the details, what he was like later on, because that's when it goes more into details of his state. The officers come to the house. They knock on the door. Jody answers the door with her attorney already on the phone. Okay, so she's ready. She's on the phone with her attorney. And how did they know he broke out? Asking over and over, do you have a warrant? They sweep the home. You have to understand this is a giant house, like compound. This is a compound. Okay, this is like a complete concrete basement type of thing, like huge safe. Like this is a monstrous house. Okay. They find a safe in there and they come up and she says, I don't know the code to the safe. Okay. As they're sweeping, they go into a bedroom and they find a little girl and she's in the bathroom closet. Her head is shaved. She's super skinny and she's absolutely terrified. So they find his sister. She's terrified. This is how they've been keeping these kids. They shaved her head. They didn't even know if she was a boy or a girl because they couldn't tell for a second. Okay. Sherry is asked about the day that she found out about her siblings. She said it's an absolute blur. And you have to remember, I relate to that the most is the phone call that you find out about the news. The shock. Like, what do you do? Like, there's no way to regulate that feeling when you get the call from hell. And so she said she couldn't even remember. And the thing is, I think it's one or the other. You either completely block out that day and you can't remember anything, or you remember every detail. I'm someone who remembers every detail when that phone call came in because I don't know why. It's like it was one of the worst things you could ever experience. And that is a hard thing to go through, guys, to hear. It's, of course, you're always going to feel for the people who are involved, like the siblings. You have the most understanding, empathy, and sympathy for them. But it's also hard to be a sibling called to be told what had actually gone down and happened. um, Kevin says he hadn't talked to the family in over a year. And then Ruby calls Kevin for the first time in a year. He says he gets the phone call. He sees her name with the heart, and his heart is elated because it's been so long. It's been so long since he had even talked to her. A long time that he'd been isolated. She calls and she was in a panic and she said, I need to explain some things. And she tells Kevin, and this is where I will have to give context about Kevin because I'm still trying to gather my thoughts here. I don't, it's easy to judge someone on certain contexts. So I need to dive a little bit deeper and not make my assumption off of this and this. Okay. I need to dive deeper on the Kevin thing, but I'm just going to tell you what I wrote as I was doing it. Ruby calls Kevin for the first time in a year and she was in a panic. And then she says that the two younger siblings, the two younger kids were demonically possessed. And Kevin asks her, well, how do you know that? How do you know that they're demonically possessed? And Ruby said that they confessed to it. She tells Kevin the younger boy got out and got to the police. And she says, I can only imagine the lies that he's telling them. We have to go back into context here about Lori and Ruby and the same points of they believe that the demons are after them. Now, where did Ruby get the demon idea? And you have to understand, we just talked about in the last episode how Jody was acting demon possessed, how so much of what has happened was around what she was pretending to be demon possessed. So this whole idea was being fed to her from Jody, right? The first thing that they both do is think that the demons are in them and that they have to do something about it. Okay. So that was the question he asked him. And she says, I can only imagine the lies that he's telling the police about them. So now Ruby's telling Kevin he's a demon and he's lying to the police. That's what she tells him about them getting out of the hell that they were in, about the little boy being saved by God himself to get out of that place and save him and his sister. As her response is, I can't even imagine the lies he's telling him. She tells him, this is where you follow this manipulation. She says to Kevin, you need to go pick up our children from the police station. She says specifically, this is your chance to redeem yourself. Very, very manipulative and very, very clear that she still knows, and I'm just going to bluntly say this, has him by the absolute balls, because she knows what she's doing when she says that. This is your chance to redeem yourself. Okay. He goes to get his kids. Okay. By a miracle of God, the lieutenant wants to open the safe. And I kid you not, he goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the freaking safe pops open. Okay. And I don't even know how many are on there, but if you have a 10-digit, I don't even know how many codes are possible, but I know it's millions of different combinations. He literally goes, I'm just going to try 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it pops open. This is where we have to explain what was found inside of it. And mind you, she's upstairs. Jody's upstairs. This is her house. And she's clearly telling you, I don't have the code to the safe. Exactly. Yeah, I don't know either, Sandra. Why? And again, let's go back to that. Why could Jody be prayed for and slept with and cared for while she was demon possessed, but the kids can't? You want to explain that shit to me? Sorry, I'm getting angry because I'm angry at both of those women for what they do. Jody can sit there and shake and convulse and be demon possessed in your home, but your kids are now what? You want to explain that one to me? Why can't the kids, the most innocent thing on the planet Earth is children, be saved from the demons, but your girlfriend can? Okay? Oh, don't cuss, Colby. You got it. You're fine. Okay, so this is where it gets really hard. And this is where I'm telling you guys to just have the discretion, understanding how bad this truly is. They go in there, and inside behind the safe is where they were keeping the horrible things that they had for these children. Okay? They had ropes, handcuffs, and gauze. They were creating a cayenne pepper and honey paste and duct tape. Okay? This is premeditated torture. They literally have a room full of devices of which they would need to continually chain and bound children. This is a problem. This is seriously, this is as sick as it gets, to torture humans, but to also torture children. And that is what they were doing. And I don't care what YouTube does with this one. I'm telling you, this is the most premeditated, horrible thing you can do. And it just gets worse. It just gets worse the deeper you go into what their daily routine was. Okay. So they break into Ruby's home because now they're looking for the other two children. No one's there. And I'm talking about they used the freaking come on, Colby. They broke in the house with the boomer, the infiltration one. Come on, Colby. What is that called? You guys know what that's called? It's the when the police break in or the SWAT breaks in and they freaking breach the door, but they use the thing, the Trojan horse, whatever. They break into Ruby's home. There's no one in there, and it's all over the place. Battering arm. Thank you, Anne. Or battering ram. Yeah, it's something like that. Ramrod, something of that nature, but it's, you know what I'm talking about. So, they break into her house to find the other kids. They find them at a friend's home, and then they start looking for Ruby. Now, I think they're the older kids. They're okay, and they're with their friends, so they don't have them malnourished, and they're safe. Okay, and I think they're in the neighborhood, but I don't know that for a fact. This is where it's so weird. So they go back. The police are at, it looks like Jody's. I did not get the context here, but it looks like it says that Ruby pulled up. So Ruby goes in the house. She's sitting there and all the police are surrounding her and they go and pick her up and tell them, hey, you got to come down. We got to talk to you. Okay. I wrote this specifically for a reason. Her demeanor is calm, slightly angry, and absolutely dead faced, cold as ice. Now, this is where it's so crazy to compare these two women because you have Lori who's smiling, who has now, probably because it has been longer, embraced her villainy. And I'm going to talk about that in another video, but I'll break down a piece here. You need to understand what the human mind is trying to do there and what the demon people that are saying others are demons are doing. These people they know they're caught. They know they're done. It's over. They know what they've done, and they still are going to blame shift it off. But the way that they act is very crucial. And both of them are, I mean, Ruby looks pissed, but nothing. Just dead faced. And she kind of looks a little angry in her eyes, but no reaction. Jody's freaking out. And this is what's interesting in the interviews. And we're going to get to this next. So now we go back. Kevin walks in and came to pick up the kids. The officers obviously wanted to talk to him, and then they read him his rights and start breaking down what it is. The officer said it was weird because Kevin told them that it had been a year since he saw his kids. So they're asking him, do you know what's going on? This and that. When they break the news down, it's hard because you watch the officer tell the state that they found his children in. And I am someone who always tries to understand the human understanding, right? And I'll look at what it's like to be in someone's shoes and the best that I possibly can. So I was thinking to myself, what would I react if I heard something like that? And I would be inconsolable. And he seemed troubled, but then he goes into context of why he wasn't as upset. This is why I'm telling you with the manipulation is interesting. Kevin says that they were wolves that wanted to tear his family apart, like as if the police were lying. He's been so isolated. Now, understand what isolation is to a human being. The worst thing you can do to a human being is isolate them with no contact, especially from loved ones. But if you put someone in isolation, we are social creatures. It is a punishment of its own. If he was this isolated, this manipulated, and this susceptible to being manipulated, he's thinking you're the bad guys. He's thinking the cops are bad. Now, this is where I had to jump back into the cult mindset that has been presented, that has been being created for however long. That's exactly what Lori and Chad are thinking themselves. They're telling each other. We had our boy freaking Ray as the king demon. Okay. They thought Ray was the literal demon king trying to attack them. They put themselves at such a high understanding, such a high bar, right? They put themselves on such a pedestal to the point where they believe to themselves that they are being attacked at this level because they are this righteous. So now even Kevin himself goes, you guys are trying to make up this stuff. This is made up. This is also shock, right? We have to understand from the human perspective, this is shock because he's digesting for the first time that it is the worst thing that you could hear that happened to your kids outside of them being unalived has happened. And it's been going on and you've been unaware and you've done nothing. That's a lot to take in at once, but he immediately puts it on them, right? So they tell him what it is. The officer said it's been weird. It was weird that he hadn't seen his kids in a long time. And then he wouldn't tell them who told. So Kevin would not tell the police that Ruby was the one that told him, go get your kids, because he wanted to protect Ruby. I wrote this down too. I said his reaction to hearing about his kids shocked ? He didn't want to be manipulated by the police. And that really got me because that's very peculiar to be that aware that you think that you're being manipulated. You want to believe so badly. And I'm going to say it because it needs to be said. There was a lot of people who did the same thing with Lori. They didn't want to believe how bad it really was. So they just did it, allow it to be a part of the reality. They didn't face the fact that it was that bad. And guess what? I think as a human being, when you're that shocked that someone you knew and loved so much could be this evil, you don't know how to react. And the first thing you try to do is deny that it's possible. It's literally the stages of grief. But you have to break that out. You have to eventually understand, hey, I knew something was weird and all that stuff, right? That was what was so weird to me, though, is that at least I knew that there was something wrong. And when I heard it, I couldn't have imagined it ever being this bad. But at the end of the day, you feel that. You feel that everything is off. And I really identify with Sherry in this because the feelings that she's having, I understand where she was coming from because you just feel something is going on and you can't put your finger on it. He didn't want to be manipulated by police, which I think is really interesting too. He wanted to save his family and he couldn't. And this is still, we're talking about Kevin. Kevin couldn't accept that it was that bad or that Ruby did that. And that's exactly what I just went into. But it's really hard to think the worst of someone to this degree. It's beyond shocking. To hear it in general is shocking. To watch it from the outside perspective is shocking. But to be told that as the father that's been absent, I don't know how I would react as well. I don't know. But it would probably be a lot more emotional, at least from what I would say. A lot more. Then they go in and Ruby wouldn't talk at all. Ruby was dead-faced, man. Absolutely dead-faced. Wouldn't say anything to police. They're asking questions. Even the officer mentions how uncomfortable she was. She's like, this is the most uncomfortable interview I've ever had. She just did not want to say any word. And it was bananas. It was bananas because she's stone cold, man. Stone cold. Okay. And I said, Lori and her are very similar in certain ways. And I'll have to explain what I mean by that. It's the demeanor. It's Lori talks, but it's the coldness. It's the, you don't even care much. That's such a peculiar thing that I would love to dissect deeper on is the inhumaneness of that moment. And they almost like, I think that they do believe they are higher beings. And so therefore they probably think that this is a Satan attack. That's what they believe in their mind, is that this is all from Satan. And I wrote, like the police are evil, ? What is that? I mean, they always think that they are the bad guys. And then she wanted a lawyer. Now, this is what I wrote, and I don't know if I'll say it. I'll just use the context. I put Jody ... On the other hand, this B says, I have nothing to hide, but her attorney said, don't say anything. She's acting like the higher power. She's getting on the side of the police. She goes, I'm a psychologist. And she tells the police, I'm with you guys. As if she understands the police perspective. She literally goes, I'm with you guys. We're the same team. I've been a psychologist. I've been on that side. I've talked to people like this. I don't know. I didn't do anything wrong. And so I'd love to just tell you what's going on. But my attorney said, don't say anything. My attorney told me not to talk. But I'm cool with you. Yeah, exactly. She said, I sit on your side. Exactly. I'm with you. And they're like, okay, not really. This is your house with all this stuff. So they knew it was manipulative, but it's just different between the two dynamics because I believe that Jody Chad parallels and the Ruby Lori parallels are very similar to one another. They go this way. Yeah, they're all within one circle, but those two, the Jody Chad and the Lori Ruby, are very similar across the way because one was the leader, one was the spiritual person, the prophet, the leader, the guider, the one that getting the revelation, this and that, and one was the more of a follower who also was the one who eventually allowed or did this to their kids. Okay. Crazy. I wrote this down because this is important. Again, this is giving more context on what it's like. And I want you guys to understand the reason we do this too is to understand in these crimes, the effect it has in real life. This happens and people are in the middle of their day or whatever they're doing and get this type of news. sometimes or wake up to this news. This is really tough, and I feel for Chad Frankie on this. Chad was working, he was a lifeguard, and his boss came out to him, okay, and goes, "I'm so sorry, it's all over the news." Chad has no idea what's going on. He hasn't spoken to his family in over a year as well, completely isolated. Chad finds out on his phone, and I wrote down specifically horrible way. He said, "I was being fed all of this news." He was in shock, and he said, "This can't be real. It has to be a setup." He couldn't believe. I mean, imagine, dude, you're at work exactly like I was for Charles, or driving to go get my license renewed, or whatever I was doing. I forgot what I was doing to get my license. I was on my way to the DMV to do something with my license, and you just get a phone call, or someone just tells you, and then you have to look it up, right? That's what I'm talking about, is that this actually happens to people in the middle of their life. So Chad literally finds out at work, goes on his break and finds out about what happened to his siblings, and it's everywhere. The news is blasting his mother's face, Jody's face, who's been his therapist for years. He has thought nothing but good of Jody and his mother. He has thought Jody is this good person. Jody has probably been hearing the most intimate things about this man's life. We have to give the context for really what this is and break down some of this stuff, because this would be so hard to believe, number one. Number two, this is intimate relationships that immediately shift out. So Chad goes out, but he believed, and this is really interesting because this is, again, the indoctrination that's happening over time. Chad believed that Jody and Ruby were God's chosen people, and the prison would crumble and they would walk out and they would stand with God. So he believed right off the bat, nope. And this takes a lot of honesty, okay? That is hard to say. Let's give him an understanding how hard that would be to admit, because people will take that out of context and be like, "Oh, you believed it." No, he did feel that way, and he doesn't feel that way anymore. But you have to understand from where he was at the time, the people he loved, and the way he was feeling in that moment. And what he said was he thought that they would get out of jail. I mean, they're God's chosen people, break through the jail. That's what it was, right? There was this idea, because they had built it up in his head for years, that they were good people, that Jody and Ruby were good, especially Jody. And she had been his therapist. Imagine your therapist doing this to your siblings, and you have to accept this about your own mother, which I understand. It took years for me to get here, and understand that your therapist mother had did this to your family, and everything has already been effed up for a long time. You've been disconnected from your family. You've already had to go through hell, and now it just got worse. Things got crazier. You know? How do you process all that? Especially with the intimacy of Jody. You have to understand, to Chad, Jody is an important person in his life. That's a big deal. That was a big part of this, because he lost someone else on top of all this, and someone who had been intimately a part of his life. That's crazy, man. That's so hard. Okay, we're gonna go back. So it's jumping back and forth, obviously, but the interviews with the kids who were treated, or how their kids were treated. Sorry, change it for who. How? Come on, Colby, can't type. The interviews with the kids were how they were treated. Okay. So this is another discretion moment. If you don't want to hear it, pop off. Okay. The youngest boy was forced to stand out in the sun all day. He was tied down to weights. They took the pictures of kettlebells and other things tied to weights. He would have to jump on a trampoline all day. Said he had to go to Hellhole Road, and they were forced to run up and down this road, as if Ruby and Jody believed that physical activity or physical punishment were a part of getting rid of a demon. I don't know where this stems from, but when you understand the context of how they were treating the kids, was to break them out. Exactly. And barefoot. It was about pain. The whole goal for Ruby, and it looks like Ruby was the most involved one because it's her notes, her stuff, right? I don't know. They didn't give me enough context on exactly who was doing it, but Ruby has notes day by day on how the routine was going. Okay. They were literally forcing these kids to do things to like physically break them. Okay. Physically break them. Police went back because they had enough evidence, or went back because they needed more evidence. So they found a blue folder and had wrote down everything day by day. And I said the line by line is horrible because I didn't even write everything down, guys. If you're interested, you can watch the episode. You can look it up. I gave you guys some context in the first one. When we first brought this whole thing up, there's some serious stuff said in this thing about her children, but I did write down this. Okay. The body, this is written by Ruby Frankie in her journal. The body must engage in good work and it must be painful. I have the power of God and he must obey. And I'm giving you different pieces. So I'm pulling just certain lines out. This is why she talked about them being snakes, and she talked about all of this stuff. The therapist who is featured in this says, then I want you to understand, I've been getting a lot of people talking about this. We're not in a huge debate here about what's going on with this. Is just what the therapist says about LDS culture. I need you guys to understand what I'm talking about when it comes to culture. The therapist says the culture of perfectionism in the LDS church is that the no unclean thing can enter the kingdom of God. So she punished the demons out of him, punished them. This was the culture and the idea that no unclean thing can get to God. Well, we know that, but guess what? You cannot make yourself clean on your own. If you could, you wouldn't need Jesus Christ. And we could go over that another time as well, but it's just that simple. It's not even you. There's nothing you do specifically other than take on Jesus because he died for your sins in behalf of you. So you could have that, because you cannot do enough works to be a good person to get to heaven. You're not going to pay your way in there with your tokens. You're not going to pay your way in there with all the good things you did. Okay. It's through Jesus Christ that we get there. It has nothing to do with your works. Okay. But the perfectionists in them were causing some of these things, and the punishment was coming from that. Exactly. I will not feed a demon is another thing she said very clearly. They weren't feeding them. She was punishing the demon in them. And there's some crazy stuff that goes back outside. Okay. This is it right here. She'd poke her son in the back after being outside all day with a cactus poker and wrote he wouldn't even flinch. Would punish his physical body. Punish him. She wrote, give your demon friend a message. And I wrote, Ruby will fight the demon until the day he dies. And that was not the demon. She wrote, until the day that her son dies, she will fight that demon. It doesn't matter. She refused to let go. She said she was fighting the demon in him, and she didn't care if her son was dead. She was going to fight the demon. That's where she was at. Oh, 100%. You think that she wasn't in perfect health the whole time, and her and Jody were in perfect health, eating whatever they wanted, doing whatever they wanted, living their life up like normal, as these kids were literally tied down in different sections of the house, completely isolated and forced to do what they did? They were living life normal. They were living life like it didn't matter. They didn't think about it. And this is where we have to understand the psychology of why we talk so much about this stuff. We break down what's going on with these human beings. And you have to look at this is not the first time this happened. Lori and Chad were willing to take life of everyone around them that they loved based off the idea of demons while they lived life, got married on the beach, cheated with each other. They did everything under the sun, begged to be with each other, right? the whole affair, this whole buildup, all of this stuff is the psychological stuff that's going on with these people. Their brains are so disconnected, I think, from what they're doing. And there's a disassociation, in my opinion, that you have to get to for these people, right? That's what it has to do. That's what's so interesting. So you said, was there drugs and alcohol involved in this case? And guess what? The LDS church does not mess with drugs or alcohol or even high caffeinated drinks, man. Like they don't do drugs and they don't do that. So from what I understand, we're talking about from the normal perspective, sober-minded adult women, and obviously when it comes to Chad, but sober-minded adults, no drugs being used, no anything. Sober-minded people premeditating this for who knows how long, but we have some backtrack on it. They were premeditating and thinking these things for time. They wanted this to happen. They wanted to get to this point, and they believed it, and they were okay with punishing and or ending lives over the idea of demons, which is completely unbiblical. And there never ever has been one single thing that has ever pointed towards ending demons ever. That is not a biblical thing about slaying demons and being no, that's not even close to biblical. So for them to constantly say these things and constantly believe this is their own belief system. And I don't know where they got it from. That's what's getting me. This is what's unhinging. Where did this demon idea come from to the zombie thing, to the punish the demons? The spiritual things and physical things aren't the same. And so you can't really punish a person to get a demon out of there, right? I don't know where this is all coming from, but it's the exact same concepts that exist in both. Okay. Again, I just want to reiterate that the youngest boy saved him and his sister's lives, as all the first respondents say. Okay. So then Chad, it goes back to Chad, and Chad is calling Jody and his mom. He messages his dad, and after a year, and then Chad goes to the house and sees his dad for the first time, sees a very skinny man, and doesn't really recognize his own dad. He said, "There's someone in the front yard, and I didn't recognize him." They hug, and then Kevin tells Chad about the evil spirits. Okay. And I have to give you guys an understanding that this is exactly why Chad was so open with this. Okay. Chad accepted the abuse as something truthful. He was manipulated as it was the right thing to do to those kids. This is how deep it really is. And I wrote that down because you need to understand the context. They believed Ruby and Jody so much. They had surrendered so much, and those women had done so much breaking down of their mentals. And I'm talking about Kevin and Chad, but Chad is just a kid, breaking their mentals down so much that they were just paper, what's it called? Sandpapered, whittled, whatever you want to call it, mentally whittled down to believe that that Jody and Ruby were good people, God's people. And that's why they believed what they believed. So Chad first accepts the idea of what had happened. And I think Kevin and him both admitted they accepted this idea. Again, I have my own personal thoughts. I disagree, but it is what it is. And, everybody is different. You have to understand, though, how deep they were really, really into this. So, but that's where he was, and he was honest about it. You have to give him an understanding. He was honest, and obviously he isn't there, though. I said being blinded by the love for people. Okay. Finally, I guess Kevin sits down with some neighbors, friends, and Kevin and them talked for about 6 hours. Kevin finally snapped out of the fog and then understood how bad it really was. This is a pivotal moment for us to understand that the brainwashing when conditioning was real, and that these men had to break out of this. This family had to break out of this. and break through the conditioning and all of it that happened to them, because it really truly is that bad. And they were truly being brainwashed for years. And we have to bring everything into context here, is that that's why they were so stuck. It's even harder because now they think, well, you justify it because you love them. There's no way. And it's the shock and all the things. You have a million things going on. And that's where they were at. So they sat down there for 6 hours, and Kevin learns to accept how awful it truly is. I wrote down both of these. All of this right here specifically was interesting because Jody pleads guilty to every charge. Okay. Every single charge. I never saw that because I didn't have the same experience. I can't even imagine what it had been like had Chad and Lori both just pleaded guilty. I really don't. I can't think of a time in my brain or a alternate reality where they just stood up and said guilty to every single one of those charges. It will never be able to, I can't imagine it. But it really shocked me to hear, because you guys know I haven't seen this. So this was the first time I've seen it. Jody loved to get people to think and believe things that didn't even make any sense. Now, this is kind of people reiterating who Jody is. It's kind of ending her story in this documentary and basically saying that Jody loved getting people to believe in something, knowing it was bullshit. Okay, and this was a Chad skill as well. Jody is by far more energetic, more inviting. Like, at least with Jody, you could look at her and understand in some way, shape, or form how she was a more dominant, louder, confident. Like, there's something about her. You'd be like, okay, well, I could see why some people could possibly believe what she's saying, and she's kind of out. And like for Chad, I'll never understand. And I'm being completely objective, but I'll never understand how Chad got people to believe him. I'll never get it. And believe, because a lot of his stuff was fictional and lore and whatever, but she loved that feeling of getting people to believe things. But then she pleads guilty. Then I wrote, Ruby also pleads guilty to every single thing, and as she's doing it, it's flashing back and forth. Kevin is hurt over her, and we'll get to that in a second. Ruby acts sad, and it's kind of like throwing in some small apologies. And I thought that was interesting. As she's pleading guilty, she's kind of saying my babies and this and that. Okay. It flashes back to Chad, and he says how hard it was to see her in ankle chains. And I just want to hit on that. I don't think a lot of people on the planet know what it's like to watch your own mother, and I guess I'll just stick to mother right now, your own mother go and be in all the jail clothes, surrounded by people, chained up in court because of what they did to your family. It's just a sight that changes you forever. And I remember the first time I went to Idaho and saw Lori, and everyone's in there, and it's full, packed. Media's outside. I'm going, what the is going on? What is happening? Why is everyone in the world here? And Chad's sitting over there, and we're in this courtroom, and it just doesn't, it's how do you compute that? The kid in you loves your mom. That person in you loves your mom. And here she is walking by with chains shackled on her, clanking on the floor. And now she's looking over to Brandon and Kay and Larry. She's smiling, and it's this evil version. And you're going, what the hell? I mean, this is the thing. We'll get to this right here. I'm going to say it. Okay. Ruby says to my babies, and she said, I was leading them to danger. She believed that dark was light and light was dark. And she gave an apology. What do I think of her apology? I think I agree. And Sherry speaks on this next, and I'll talk about her. My personal opinion is I don't think she feels bad. I think that she just had enough time to realize that what she was doing was horrible, and she got in trouble. And now she just, who knows what her thoughts are, but she cried a lot through her YouTube. There was a lot of that demeanor there. So I don't believe that she was genuine. If they would have gone any further, any longer, you saw from one specific note, and I'll pull that note right here to tell you again. I just mentioned it. And she says, I will go until even after you're dead. So she was speaking to herself in a freaking notes about her son, that she's going to fight that demon to even the end of her son's life. So it was going there without a doubt. And that's what it was. There was no middle ground. It absolutely was that. There was no other outcome. They were not trying to get the demons out of them. They believed in basically punishing them until the ultimate thing would happen. And that is just what it was. Sherry also is very clear. She does not believe that she was truly sorry. She specifically said, I've seen those crocodile tears before, and I don't believe that she's sorry. So, and then Sherry, they asked her, would you ever speak to her again? Sherry says, I'll never speak to her again. It doesn't matter if she gets out or not. I think that's very interesting, because everybody in this position has to get to a point where, would you speak to them again? I don't know how many times I've got this question, right? How many times have I had the question, Colby, you're going to talk to your mom again? Colby, are you going to speak to your mother again? It has to feel like it has a purpose. What's the purpose of it? Yeah, exactly, Kel. Yeah, she's not sorry for the kids. She's not sorry for what happened. They were going down the same path as Lori and Chad. And I think it's interesting because I don't know where this is. I have to find it, but I've heard it a lot cited by you guys, that Sherry specifically said she watched the Netflix documentary that I did, and that made her even more worried. So I want to know that story. I want to know where that's from. If you guys know where it is, email me, or if there's a clip or some reason that people know that, I want to know. I want to see that or hear it. But it's in her book. Well, good. I bought her book, so I'm going to listen to her book. Okay, good. It's in her book. Good. I have it. I have her book. I bought it when it first came out on Audible, so I'm going to listen to it. But that's insane, because it's just this whole thing, that whole apology, that whole idea of speaking to them. I don't even think if Lori would apologize in any way, shape, or form, would I want to keep talking to her or have some relationship with her. And what's really crazy about speaking to your mother after you know everything, right? And right now I know more than I ever knew, because we watched the trials, and I was ready to face that stuff. But to know how deep it goes, and to know how pre-planned it was, and watch your own mother fight to tooth and nail to be proven innocent in their own cases as their own lawyer, there's a level that I can't explain. It will never make sense. But I also don't think that any of those children or anybody in that family got any closure from Ruby's apology either, because I don't think that they even felt it or believed it. So I think it's interesting that they asked her. Chad was asked, do you miss her? And this is a big one. We need to hit on this, the human side of this. And he said he misses a mother figure. And he said that he misses having, the mom he had when he was a kid. Again, what we talked about, building up your mother in your brain rather than who she really is and what you thought you had. And then he said that she shouldn't be able to talk or even get out until the kids are over 18 years old, which I think is interesting, because I agree. Obviously, I don't think she should ever be able to ever speak to her children again unless they want to speak to her. That should never even be a thought. But the human side for this for Chad is, how do you deal with the duality of the frustration, pain, and betrayal and everything that you feel when it's your own mother? How do you cope with that? Of course, you wish you had a mom. Your whole plan was you were going to go and get married and come back and have your grandkids and have this big happy family, and everybody was going to be a part of each other's lives. And you don't think anything other than that. You obviously come to that place And that is what you think is going to happen because that is what we call normal. That is just the normal thought that you have in your life. This next part was interesting as well. Kevin is asked if he still loves Ruby, and he says yes. He misses his wife. And some people, I'm sure, are like, how could you possibly feel that way? I think Kevin loves the Ruby he knew, and he still associates that person with who he doesn't think she's changed enough. Like, I get it. I understand at least what he's saying. He still loves that. I mean, he said, and it's very interesting. If you listen to him, what he says, you can't change the moments of having our children together, the real things, the real experiences we had, the love I felt for her. It doesn't change no matter how evil she is, right? That's what he's saying. I have a very different perspective. I think that love is a gift from God, and it's also in some ways a choice. Well, I always have love for Lori. I don't feel love for Lori. And I think that I figured out why. And I think that I understand why I don't love her still. I loved the idea of her, and I have completely let her go as if she passed away. And to me, if I were to even tell you if I love her, I loved what I thought I had, and I let that go and I let that to rest, and I put the flowers on the grave, and that's it. But I don't continually love her. And I think that that's the choice of the pain. But I did love her. And she'll always be the person who gave birth to me. But that is it. That is what the extent of it is. It is almost as if I think how some people who have never met their parents feel, that you feel grateful for the birth or whatever the case is that they did for you, grateful for those things, but the love is not connected there to each other's hearts. That's the best way I could explain it. But he obviously was married to her. So, yeah, exactly. We all build up characters in our head of who people are. And we love that idea. We love the idea of it. We love the idea of love. We love the idea of a person. But not every time when it comes into reality do we love it. We don't actually love everything. And so reality sometimes is a harsh place to live. It's a good question. We'll have to dive into that. I saw that Kevin did file something against Jody Hildebrandt, and I don't know what that's all about. So maybe we'll do a quick video on that once I look it up. They ask him, Kevin is asked, how do you make sense of this? And Kevin's answer to me is peculiar, and I don't know how to explain it. His answer is, Kevin said, this is a story of love and hope and deception and control. And I was just confused with the love and the hope. I understand his ups and downs. I understand that he must have had hope for his family. He must have had those moments, like he's a normal person. Everybody feels in a range of things. But to me, the real story is the slow decline of another mom who branches off LDS, who continues to go down a path, who is a selfish, self-centered, abusive person, who their will is more important than anything, and then also now justifies that with some godliness, and God tears themselves to be able to justify everything that happens therefore after. That's how I look at it. That's how I see it, and that's the only way I think you can really think about it. And that was all I wrote. That's all she wrote, folks. This is a very hard documentary to watch if you do watch it. I told you guys all my thoughts on it, but you know, it's hard to watch another family and understand some of that pain. It's weird. You don't want to be in that club and you don't want to be there, but it's reality. I understand a lot of what Sherry and Frankie or Sherry and Frank. Hold on. I understand a lot of what Sherry and Chad feel, and sometimes Kevin in the earlier parts, um, mostly in the first, episode, not the later parts. But I'm telling you that I feel for them and I understand them in a way that just isn't fun to understand, but I get it. And now what is it about is about the life that's lived after. We talk about these things because what is now after? And they all deserve to have a life that is separate from what happened to them. And if they want to tell their story, that is their right. We are here talking about their story, but we don't know their stories. And that's what makes it important is if they ever feel the need to tell their stories for good, I encourage them to do so if they feel that that is what they're supposed to do. And I would just be there as a support, and they know that they have my support. And I want to say it again publicly that they have my support, and I want to be here in any way possible that I can. So just so they know that. And so you guys know what I think we've learned and understand is the awareness that we need to bring to the world is this is more common than anything we could have ever imagined, and we'd hope that this would be the only cases, but I'm sure that things like this happen more often. And the signs of someone you see with this religious stuff needs to be addressed early. And if people are talking the way that these groups were talking, they need to be addressed. We need to address it because it's a problem. It's a problem. And it's leading children to be unalived. It's leading to lifelong traumas, and it's leading to hurting people over selfish, godly calling people who are leading cults right out in the open. The cults that they lead they don't look like a cult. They don't sound like a cult. Maybe they do to us now, but in that moment, people don't see what it is. So we are putting and pulling out the blinders of people who are falling away to these cults. And I'm praying that we are making a difference in people's lives for that reason. And knowing that this is a community for people to come and understand that we get it. We understand how hard it is. We understand how bad things get. We understand that things are terrible, but we also know that there is life to be lived and we got each other's backs no matter where you are on that tier list. If you're getting past it, if it's been years and you're still struggling with it, doesn't matter. If it's fresh, we're all here to be a forward moving community who can understand each other's stories because we can all learn from it. I wish nothing but the best for every single one of the people involved here, all of the Frankie family, every single one of the kids. I really pray that they know that there is some life after this. Just know that, and that you can heal in some ways, and some things will never fully go away, but you can get better and your life can be real. And I'm telling you this from my perspective of someone who wanted to unalive myself over situations that have happened to my family and to myself and things of that nature. I've been there, and I know that if I would have done that, I wouldn't have a beautiful family, my beautiful children, and I wouldn't have an amazing community, and I wouldn't have anything that I have now. And I feel like that's the biggest point is the lows and the highs of life. You need to understand that there's still hope. And if anything I can do for you today is just show you that there is some kind of hope. And it's because I'm still here that other people can have some hope because I've been there multiple times and I get it. So just if you know someone that's struggling, you can bring them into the community if you want to and let them know that we're here to talk about these things because this is what life's all about. And we're trying to create a beautiful community, which you guys have, where people feel safe to talk about the hard stuff and know that we can still laugh, cry, all of it. It's life. It's called life, and that's what we're here for. So I appreciate you guys. Thank you for being a part of this breakdown. That was the last episode of The Devil in the Family. If you guys are interested, you can go watch it on Hulu. I think the next thing that I'm going to talk about a little bit more is just probably my thoughts on Sherry's book. I don't want to like read it or like give you a million thoughts because I don't want to like pull her book and put it on here. So I'll just listen to it and then let you guys know what I think. But that was basically the extent of what I wanted to do and talk about, is to bring an understanding, bring some awareness, and then be able to move forward. And hopefully, like if there's ever opportunities for us to have the Star Wars podcast, have an open invitation for people to know that this is a platform for them to share their feelings, that is always an invitation and the extension to anybody, is that they know that this is a place where they'll be treated with love and respect and understanding by the community and by myself as well. So I appreciate you guys. Love you. And I will see you very soon. And we'll be streaming again on Wednesday, but I'll let you guys know what's going on in the community tab. Appreciate you. Love you. Have a great rest of your day.